From above, the city reveals its scars and promises, avenues that stretch like ropes, alleys that meander in search of shade, plazas that condense centuries into a single heartbeat. Nothing is accidental. Water negotiated borders, topography imposed folds. The market left its signature on every corner. Where the plane is straight, the ambition to measure everything looms. Where it breaks, the terrain speaks, the custom, the fear of fire. To read a city is to decipher that invisible score. Today we tune our ears to follow its patterns. From the medieval labyrinth to the modern chessboard, from the monumental radio to the experiment that returns the streets to the people. Let's begin. Type 1. Organic. Before the plan, there was the passage. Where the mud compacted, a street was born. Where a bridge joined two banks, a market appeared. Organic lines emerge from immediate necessity and untamed geography. In the Medina of Fez, passageways coil like roots, seeking shade and water. In the old neighborhoods of Istanbul, alleys rise and fall, following the invisible currents of the Golden Horn. In Venice, navigability was the main urban planner. Gondola routes dictated bottlenecks, small surprise squares, and silences where the sea comes in to breathe. Walking here is a choreography of unexpected angles. The pedestrian rules because there's no room for vehicles, and orientation is achieved more by smell than by technology. This pattern is austere with cars and immense with human experience. It offers microclimates, corners, and scales that speak to the ear, but its beauty has a flip side. Public services become more expensive. Universal accessibility stumbles, and the emergency circulates patiently. Even so, the organic fabric preserves the promise of the city as discovery. The essential is always just around the corner. Type 2. Grid. In contrast to the labyrinth, the checkerboard, the grid is the promise of order transformed into a floor. From Hippodamus of Miletus to the laws of the Indies that laid out Hispanic America, the orthogonal pattern democratizes access. Each block is a clear, divisible, mortgageable unit. In Manhattan, the 1811 plan turned hills into straight lines and sold the future in plots. In Buenos Aires, the colonial checkerboard expanded onto the pampas like a page without margins. In Barcelona, the example opened interior courtyards and chamfers so that sunlight and traffic could breathe simultaneously. The grid is efficient for distributing services, planning transportation, and building quickly. Its formal neutrality allows for different architectures without disrupting the score. But that same neutrality can flatten the experience if there are no variations. Without diagonals, parks, or spatial sequences, the pedestrian walks to a metronome. The grid shines when it's deliberately interrupted. A boulevard that cuts through, a plaza that widens, a green corridor that runs toward the river. Order, yes, but with syncopation. Type 3. Radial. There are cities that are born from a center like a bonfire. The radial pattern distributes its radii like paths that converge on an idea. Power, commerce, memory. Paris, after Haussmann, organized boulevards that, more than streets, are perspectives. In Moscow, concentric rings tell stories of expansion. In Brussels, avenues originate from squares that become scenes. The radial system is educational for the visitor. Reaching the heart is easier than leaving it at rush hour. Monumentality finds its natural theater here. A dome at the end of an axis is worth an entire chapter on urban planning. But the price is the asymmetry of traffic and the funnel effect. Everything enters and everything gets stuck. The radial pattern works when it combines robust public transportation that doesn't depend on the street, metro, commuter trains, and when the edges, not just the center, receive investment. The camera moves away from kilometer zero. No city can survive if its periphery is merely a spectator. Type 4. Polycentric city. When a city grows to the point of devouring itself, one answer emerges: divide the power of the center. The polycentric city distributes functions across several cores connected like neurons in a single brain. Instead of an all-absorbing downtown, subcenters emerge with their own identity. Financial, cultural, technological, residential. Tokyo understood this before anyone else. Shinjuku, Shibuya, Ginza, and the Dutch Randstad transformed several mid-sized cities into a single metropolis of equilibrium. Madrid and its metropolitan crown are trying the same, an urban archipelago linked by trains and orbital highways. This pattern seeks to reduce travel, diversify opportunities, and balance prices and pace of life. But its success depends on the interweaving between the points. If transportation fails, each core becomes isolated. If planning ignores differences, competition instead of cooperation occurs. At its best, the polycentric city is an ecosystem. Each neighborhood flourishes without needing to worship a single core. The city ceases to be a hierarchy and becomes a living network where work, housing, and leisure share the spotlight. If you're enjoying looking at the city through this magnifying glass, subscribe. In the next section, we'll see how the grid learns to bend without breaking, embracing real topography and flows. See you later. Type 5. Loose grid. Between strict geometry and the labyrinth, there exists a more elastic way of organizing. A grid that can bend without breaking. The loose grid accepts that topography and real flows rule. In San Francisco, hills forced the interruption of streets and the invention of urban staircases. In Medellin, the grid adapts to slopes and ravines while the metro cable system stitches together heights with stations that become plazas. In Sydney, orthogonal lines coexist with ancient diagonals and bay edges that demand a waistline. This pattern operates through local agreements. A park that eats up 2 blocks, an axis that rotates 5 degrees, a street that prioritizes trams and bicycles. The loose grid facilitates the city's evolution without demolition, allows for the introduction of superimposed layers, greenery, mobility, water, and turns error into a learned curve. Its danger lies in losing legibility if each exception is distinct. Its power lies in being an open pattern that integrates the unexpected. Type 6. Suburban. Outside the central focus, another promise took shape from the automobile. Houses with gardens, quiet streets, shopping centers with endless parking. The suburban pattern draws cul-de-sacs that drive away through traffic and collector avenues that concentrate everything. In Phoenix, Dallas, or the metropolitan crowns of Madrid and Paris, low density spreads like wildfire. Life is good within the lot and suffering at the interface, that border between the neighborhood and any destination other than the garage. School, work, and the supermarket require miles. Childhood loses autonomy, and public transportation becomes expensive per passenger. But the suburb also retains its virtues: silence, private greenery, communities with identity. The question is not to demonize it, but to make it compatible with the times to come. Where the suburb blends with active neighborhood centers, safe cycling networks, and bus or tram corridors, it gains resilience. Where it only grows in width, it will mortgage tomorrow with today's traffic interests. Type 7. Superblock. When a city filled with cars decides to return the streets to the people, it experiments with the scale of the block. The superblock groups several streets into a larger unit and modifies hierarchies. Through traffic circulates around the perimeter. Inside, speeds drop, priority changes, and benches, trees, and playgrounds appear. Barcelona has turned this idea into public policy. In Poblenou, Saint-Antony, and the Example, streets that were once shortcuts are now living spaces. In Vitoria-Gasteiz, the network of superblocks supports a mobility that prioritizes active travel. The result is not just silence, it also offers local commerce, terraces that broaden life, and urban temperatures that drop a few degrees. The superblock is a graft onto existing fabric. It doesn't require demolition, but it does require agreement. It requires a complex choreography between neighbors, logistics, emergencies, and last-mile delivery. What is remarkable is its pedagogy. It demonstrates that public space is the most productive resource when it ceases to be a parking lot and returns to a square. Type 8. Green net. Beyond asphalt, a new logic is beginning to draw the maps of the 21st century. The green network. It's not a pattern of streets, but of ecological corridors that connect parks, rivers, vegetable gardens, and living roofs. Instead of viewing greenery as waste, it places it at the center of planning. Singapore wove its vertical jungle between towers. Copenhagen traces its green fingers that breathe toward the sea. Vitoria-Gasteiz transformed its green ring into everyday infrastructure. In this model, water and vegetation are the new axes of mobility and public health. They filter the air, lower the temperature, and restore a human scale to the city. The green network not only beautifies, but repairs. It infiltrates the impermeable, stitches segregated neighborhoods, dampens noise, and creates pedestrian and bicycle routes that compete with the road. But it's not decoration. It requires management and continuity because a broken corridor is a disrupted ecosystem. Each pattern contains a way of understanding urban life. None is innocent or self-sufficient. All cities are hybrids, and their quality depends not on the name of the pattern, but on how it treats the people who inhabit it. If water finds its course, so does the city. What changes the experience is not the abstract outline, but whether that outline allows a child to walk alone to school, a bakery to endure on the corner, a tree in the square to take root. Perhaps that's why, when we remember a trip, we don't think of the layout, but rather of the shadow of an afternoon, the laughter that came from a balcony, the smell of bread before turning the corner. If you're interested in seeing your city through different eyes, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video.